Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 319, cover dated December 1994. The cover here by Steve Epting. Note how they're using the cover logo for X-Men Unlimited in order not to crowd out Epting's wonderful art here on this cover. It's a really great image. I love that low angle he uses on Archangel and Psylock here, and also the detail on the statue, which is up on the roof of some classical architecture type building. And I was thinking about this, the god represented here is Mercury, but I'm not entirely sure whether there's a thematic reason for Mercury being in the image, and or whether it has something to do with just simply Epting's photo reference that he used for this image. So penciled and inked by Steve Epting. Great work. So let's open this one up to the splash page. And there's 3 storylines running through this issue. Each featuring a pair of characters, beginning with Rogue and Iceman here. So where are they? It turns out, it's a really nice splash page too. It turns out, if we turn the page, that they are on Long Island at the beach. So I'll just move this around so you can get the full sweeping image here. A lot of work put into the design of this ice sci-fi city that Bobby's created, and that is an expression of his creative imagination. And Rogue says here, as she admires his handiwork, "Bobby," she says, "I don't mean to be getting personal and all, but is there anything you all want to say? Something on your mind?" And Iceman says, "Not a thing. Why?" So the title of the story, Untapped Potential, and that has to do in respect of Iceman going back to issue 314 and the night that Emma Frost took over his body and used his powers way beyond anything he had ever imagined doing with them. And here the credits: Scott Lobdell, words, Steve Epting, guest penciler, and the work he does on this issue, as well as a recent issue of X-Men Unlimited, in effect would land him a job at the X offices, working on X Factor in a couple of months' time. And I really enjoyed that run of his on X Factor. So Dan Green and Tim Townsend are the inkers. We start off with Dan Green's inks over Epting's pencils, and I'll point out the page that we switch over to Tim Townsend to the end of the issue. Chris Eliopoulos, letterer, and there's a little reference there to his honeymoon with his wife Audra. And then Steve Buccellato and a couple of others credited with color. I wonder, are they his digital computer assistants? So there you go. So let's continue with this story line regarding Iceman. It really is focused on Iceman and his relationship with his father, and maybe how that factors into his not realizing his full potential. So he remembers a time that he walked out after dinner with his father to the beach because his father enjoyed a cigar after dinner and his mum wanted him out of the house. And Bobby says, "Dad was never really a big fan of me. Ta-da, Pops, what do you think? About building sandcastles?" he asked. "I think it's hardly a skill that'll serve you well in life, Robert. A man doesn't get anywhere in this world by dreaming, boy, by making castles in the sand." So young Bobby Drake crushed there, and realizing as an adult now, "My dad, what a charmer, huh?" And Rogue asks him, "How old were you when you realized he was wrong? Whoever said he was wrong?" So, to use pop psychology language, he's internalized his father's judgment of him as a dreamer who's unrealistic, and maybe that's part of the reason why he hasn't fully plumbed the depths of his potential, and so it remains untapped. And then the scene switches to the Xavier Institute. Nice drawing of the venerable mansion there, and Professor X is asleep and dreaming. So we got a turn the page sideways for his dreamscape, and he finds himself in Israel in his dream. And there's somebody there with him, behind him, saying that they don't think it's odd at all that he should dream himself in Israel, and that he's at ease and at peace in the dream. He says, the person behind him says, before you used your vast mental powers to found the X-Men, this was where we spent the happiest time of our lives. Is that entirely true, old friend? Asked Professor X. And we see the silhouette here of a standing figure behind him. As happy as I could be at the time. We were young, naive, two best friends with vastly different ideologies. Now that's a clue as to who this could be. Convinced we could create a single ideal between the two of us. And Professor X looks into the distance and thinks, the unbridled optimism that is youth. I remember it well. Let's turn the page and see who the mysterious speaker is. It is, of course, Magneto. And this is a call back to Uncanny X-Men 309 when Scott Lobdell explored Professor X's past, his relationship with Amelia Vaught, and had Magneto, a representation of Magneto in his dream, interrogate him about that past and his relationship with Amelia. So here's Magneto again, or so it seems. So Magneto asks him the question, wouldn't it have been better if he hadn't have been around to interfere with Professor X's plans and dreams? We'll pick up with that a little later, but then we're back to reality, and as the narrative caption says, not everything it's cracked up to be. And so we've got Rogue and Bobby driving to Bobby's parents' house, as it turns out, for dinner. And Bobby starts talking about Rogue's relationship with Gambit, how fraught it has been of late, and she's not interested in talking about that with him, and insists that Remy doesn't play with her head because that's what Iceman thinks. But he keeps going and he says, oh please, come on Rogue, it's not like the two of you live in a cave somewhere, it's a small house for a mansion. And she insists that whatever's going on between them is between them. He says in reply, of course it is, but that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to care about you. Let's look at the facts. He hits on you, forgets to mention he has a wife, forgets to mention when she comes back to life again, forgets when he's got a list, he's got a catalogue, and she gives him the point. Not too pathetic. But Iceman says there's nothing pathetic about wanting to be loved, Rogue, and that charms her. She says that was almost profound. So the reader might be wondering whether Iceman is in some respect moving in on Gambit's territory, or if there isn't something else going on in terms of these two characters who haven't had any time spent together really, and in particular because of the division of the X-Men into the blue and gold teams. They never worked together in that period, so they're getting some time together now, and it's interesting to see them interact. But then Bobby's father emerges from the house, sarcastically asking them, so tell me lovebirds, are you two going to be joining us for dinner, despite the fact that you're 3 hours late, or will you be going straight on to your room? So Bobby's father, not the most pleasant or easiest of men or fathers, and his mother kind of long-suffering and maybe blind to the father's faults as well, so she's the positive one, invites them in and invites them to wash up, and she'll put the dinner on. So Bobby there with a face on him, sure mom, be right in, and says quietly to Rogue, oh, this is going to be fun. But Rogue insists your parents aren't the Sentinels. And then there's an interesting little kind of parallel there where the father also says to the wife quietly, oh, this is going to be fun. She shushes him and tells him to go set the table. So then we have our third storyline in New York City, the Starlight Room, and it is Psylocke and Warren Worthington on a dinner date and a dance date at this point. And it turns out that the hotel is owned by Warren Worthington himself. And we get a little explanation that Cameron Hodge, although he took over Worthington Enterprises, a good chunk of Warren's family fortune remained intact. And he says, besides, I have everything I need, I have you. What do you mean by that, Warren? Asks Psylocke. By the way, this is the point that we switch over to Tim Townsend on inks for the rest of the issue. So you can see a change in the hatching here, where we don't have that characteristic Dan Green brushwork, and you've got that finer, maybe even more finicky line from Tim Townsend. So Warren charms Psylocke, and she says that their relationship feels perfect, and so he flies her off the roof into the night, and the way they're there wondering about whether it counts as running out on the bill if you actually own the place. So a little bit of humour there from Lobdell. And then we're back at Long Island and this uncomfortable family dinner, and we have the confrontation now between father and son, where the father's still harping on about how late Bobby was. Let me guess, you were saving the world? Not the entire world, Dad. No, just Westchester. Suppose no one owns a razor in Westchester, because he hasn't shaved, so he's getting his cracks in and his remarks while passively aggressively reading the Daily Bugle while making these remarks, and then saying, I guess we should just be grateful you didn't bring that Topol girl around. Her name is Opal, Dad, with an O. And the way you carry on, so help me, it's a wonder I invite anyone here. So tensions rising, and then Rogue is kind of suggesting maybe they call it a night, call things quits. And the father icily says, once, just once, is it too much to ask that you bring home a normal girl? And Bobby has turned the newspaper to ice, and it's fallen apart in the father's hand. And then he says to him, define normal girl. So here we go. They have at it. Don't you dare start using those blasted powers of yours in my home. You can pal around with your friends all day, but I will not tolerate you turning this house into a sideshow. I won't have it. Please, Dad, I've been hearing this crap for 6 years. So this then is an indication maybe of how long Bobby's had his powers and how old he is. How old was he when he joined the X-Men? 16? So is he supposed to be 22 here? And the father says, you're trotting out the same old circus act, Bobby. Only the faces change. 1 week she's Italian, the next it's Japanese, and now this one is a what, Dad? A mutant. That's what this is all about, isn't it? You're just disgusted by anything that doesn't fit into your limited definition of normal. Sorry if I disappointed you, Dad. Sorry for you. And he walks off, telling his mother he'll call her. So no dinner eaten. And then Rogue says, look, maybe it's not her place to say this, Mr. Drake, to the father, but over the years, Bobby has told me a lot about you. He said you were an honest man, a hard worker, a veteran of war, and a loving husband. Maybe it was just cause you didn't know for sure before today, but he never mentioned you were a bigot. And there he is. That's silenced him there. So, quite a dramatic scene, the most dramatic in the story. And then we switch to a different kind of drama, the Holocaust. And we have Magneto here saying, gaze upon this scorched earth we've created, the two of us, by the constant struggle between our vastly different methods of achieving the same goal. As the world is engulfed by the flames of ignorance and intolerance, how do the two most powerful mutants on the planet spend their time? We fight amongst ourselves when we could be saving these people, enlightening our genetic brethren. So interesting, and Xavier isn't having any of that. He thinks that we can't know it's true if his dream would have been fulfilled if Magneto hadn't been around to interfere. For better or for worse, it's not our place to tamper with what was. Rather, we can only forge what is to be. And then it's revealed who has been behind this particular dream and speaking through the dream Magneto. It's David. It's Professor X's son. He's recovered from his coma, and we saw that in X-Men 38. You'll find the review of that on the channel. But then we go back to New York, and we've got this romantic tension between Archangel and Psylocke, and a little bit of a joke here coming from Warren, where Psylocke says, aren't we obligated to whine and fret and come up with one reason after another why we shouldn't be together? Of course, he says, and I should reveal I'm your uncle's clone from an alternate reality, and you're supposed to die and come back to life a few dozen times. Well, she's died once already, and she's come back once, and it's going to happen again in her future. So that one turned out to be not exactly a joke. This still hasn't happened. He hasn't come back as Psylocke's cloned uncle from an alternate reality. So he says to her, in conclusion, what do you say we try something really radical? Great top-down view here by Steve Epting. I must make sure I praise the art a little bit more in this review because it's excellent. And he says, and cut to the chase, let's just see where this incredible attraction leads us. So they kiss, and that is a great image of them flying over the city and kissing. And she says, you're suggesting we protect each other with everything we have, heart, body and soul, almost a Claremontism. Is that a yes? Then the kiss. Yeah, so actually my slight little criticism of Epting is on a few of these pages, it's a little unclear as to the reading order of the panels, because you do want to go 1, 2, 3 rather than 1, 2, 3, 4 and here for the big kiss. So that's the only criticism I'd have of his work. Beyond that, it's excellent. I think at the time I first read this comic, I wasn't 100% enamored of his work, but I most certainly am now. And I think I changed my mind about his work on X Factor, and in particular Factor X, the Age of Apocalypse 4 issues. I think those were the ones that really changed my mind about his work. And then we go to Montauk, Long Island. Bobby's back at the beach making real sandcastles now. And, like they're kind of debriefing on the disastrous dinner. And Rogue says, when Bobby's there wondering that he just doesn't get it, it's called stupidity. It's not supposed to make sense. The color of a person's skin, their religion, bad genes. If you want to hate a body, bad enough, any reason will do you. But my whole life I've tried to accept everyone for who they are. Even before I got my powers, before I learned I was different, I was always the guy who made friends with the new kid in class. 3rd grade, I beat up the class bully because he was picking on the smaller kids. Want to hear the funny part? Ever since I was a kid, I thought I learned all that from my parents, from my dad. And now I have no idea where I learned it all. So, ta-da. Now for the finishing touch, he puts an X flag on. And Rogue responds to all of that by saying, Bobby, just for the record, your daddy was wrong. What he said about an imagination being worthless is the only way any of us have a dreaming of a better world. Yeah, well, apparently Dad was wrong about a lot of things, but this will prove ironic because in Xavier's dream, it's all about dreaming of a better world, and it's David Haller's dream of a better world that is going to set in motion the Age of Apocalypse, a much, much worse world. How idealism can go very, very wrong. So then we're back at the Xavier Institute, and Professor X is woken up from his nightmare by the Beast, and the Beast, because he got a psionic call from Professor X, and so Beast asks him, who attacked you? And it wasn't an attack, he says. It was his son, David Haller, Legion. Hank asks him, which of his multiple personalities are we dealing with, Professor? Because Legion always had a schizophrenic psyche with split and multiple personalities, but that's not the issue here. Professor X says it's much worse. He says that that David is at peace with himself and whole. So Hank asks, well, isn't that a good thing? Good. A mind perhaps more powerful than my own, says the professor. A mind whose limits have never been fully gauged, if they indeed exist at all. A mind wielded by a desperate, unstable boy on some mysterious mission. No, Hank, I wouldn't qualify that as a good thing. Well, sure, when you put it like that, he says. Professor X is fired up. The computer, system on, but what's he going to do? Next month, Legion Quest Part 1. So, and also the return of Joe Madureira on art duties. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 319, character focused in general, but also a bit of a prologue to Legion Quest 2. If you enjoyed the video, please like it in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.